Welcome, fellow horror hounds, and welcome to the latest episode of Talk and Stalk, your unholy home for horror. I'm your host, as always, Barry, and I have a very special guest with me today, Mark Iverson, a published author and fellow horror fan. Good to have you here, Mark.
It's good to be here, sir, and thank you very much for asking me, and I'm more than happy to shamelessly publicise myself as much as possible.
Yep. Now, obviously, we've been talking a little bit for a few weeks now, I believe it is. And obviously, you've had a couple of books published. Obviously, you're a big horror fan like myself, and that's...
If I may show them to you, of course.
Yeah.
Book number 1, and Cursed Horror Stars.
Yep.
Diving down the 5 horror grades. I'll just go through them. Lon Chaney Jr., Basil Rathbone, Peter Lorre, Bela Lugosi, and Robert Quarry, who's also the other front cover. And the second one, which came out last year, it was one of the highlights of rather a bad year with COVID, is Vincent Price, The British Connection. Yep. Which, again, it's another biography, but it focuses on not just his British films, but his strong British links as well.
Yeah.
And I might as well show you this. A friend of mine got me this for a Christmas present. It's a mug with Cursed Horror Stars. It's my favourite mug. So
yeah.
It is cheap, by the way. I mean,
yeah. This isn't promotion or any sort.
Of course not. No, yeah. I mean, I'm just saying, if anybody wants to order a mug, you're going to have to do it yourself because we don't sell mugs, I'm afraid.
So, yeah, let's talk about, obviously, you've got a lot of icons there. There's a lot of horror icons that really need no introduction to horror fans out there. Now, let's talk about the books. What was the first book that was actually published? Which of the two came first?
It was Cursed Horror Stars that came out in 2015, November 2015. So you could say I was celebrating my 50th birthday with the publication of a book. And with Cursed Horror Stars, again, I'll show you the book cover there. I mean, I've always wanted to be a writer. I always liked writing, and of course, I was always a horror movie fan. I have, if anyone pops into my office, they're going to see I've got a massive library of horror-related books, and it was just a subject. I mean, movies in general. I mean, not just horror. I love James Bond.
Yeah,
I'm a big fan of Bond. I can actually, I was in mourning the loss of Sean Connery. It was one of the great icons. I'm a big fan of British comedy as well. I mean, anything Ealing, Bolting Brothers, the films. Huge fan of Terry Thomas, and again in Mourning, Dame Barbara Windsor, another dear lady. And so I'm very much like all films. I mean, it's just I'm just a big movie fan.
Yeah,
and it's basically part of it's kind of grown up. Never had I wouldn't say I had the world's greatest childhoods. So you could say you can find yourself just totally immersed in all this
great escapism.
I think what really was, and my hero was Peter Cushing, the late great Peter Cushing, closely followed by Vincent Price. But then you got introduced to the other horror stars like Boris Karloff, Christopher Lee. Basil Rathbone to me is Sherlock Holmes, with no disrespect to Cushing and other actors who are great Holmes portrayals of Holmes.
Yeah,
Rathbone was the man. So, and I was always very fascinated with Robert Quarry. Now, when I first decided to write a book, I initially had an idea of doing like a Halliwell's Film Goers Companion, an A to Z, which I think sadly, when you look at the way those kind of reference books just aren't there anymore. You want a reference book, you go on to IMDb. There's very few opportunities of seeing a reference book actually in print, which is a shame. Yeah. But that's the way it's the way technology is, and you just got to accept it.
Yeah.
So it was kind of handy because I did when I had a fair wealth of information to write for, and of course I ended up writing for a movie webman called Shadowlocked. I don't know if you've heard of.
I haven't heard of it.
That. No. It's defunct now, sadly. But I wrote about 30 odd articles. For the magazine. I also wrote film and theatre reviews for a Northeast magazine called Up Front, and I also wrote for some Works magazines, and also some, interesting enough, non-film related articles for the Geneva Times. I had a friend of mine who was an assistant editor, so I wrote one piece which kind of links with the movies, because as a kid I grew up reading Tintin. Tintin was hero.
Hergé, yes, same here. Asterix as well.
Asterix as well, and also little, not as well known but still popular, was Lucky Luke the Cowboy.
Oh yes, I've heard it.
And I wrote a piece, Tintin's Links to Switzerland, which actually, when I talk about Hergé, he was very much into travel, and Switzerland was one of his favourite places. And from what I, when you learn about it, apparently it was the Calculus affair. Professor Calculus stayed at the Hotel Carnarvon in Geneva. And apparently, I've never been there, and hopefully maybe one day I will. It was actually a room that's totally dedicated to Tintin memorabilia.
All right.
I'll have to see that. But yes, I was into that. And so I had a great love of and literature as well. I mean, anything horror related. I was a big fan of Robert Bloch, Richard Matheson.
Psycho, 1959 novel, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Bloch himself, he had, I wouldn't say he had a disregard for the book, because to him it said he just wrote a good book, and then it suddenly became a hit film, which he had nothing to do with. And then suddenly he's now from the author of Psycho, and he found that a bit disconcerting at first. But then he just said, "Well, if you can't beat him, join him."
Yeah, because he wrote a lot of great short stories, didn't he? That were actually adapted into TV and film. Yeah.
Indeed, I mean, he wrote various episodes for the Twilight Zone and the Outer Limits. I mean, it was good, good time in the 60s, and naturally, Amicus made very good use of his stories in some of their Paul Mantel movies. So I found myself wondering what I'm going to do next, because this reference book was unprintable. And so what I wanted to do was go look at the downside of typecasting. Now, typecasting, you look at it's probably not so much now. A lot of actors seem to, probably because they earn so much now, they can afford to sort of like take different career moves. But the older days, especially with Hollywood and so on, you're pigeonholed into certain roles. Now, it's great if you play a policeman for the rest of your life, but suddenly if the demand for playing those roles are gone, you'll be having trouble trying to go, working in other movies or working at all. So typecasting is always a big thing. And with horror typecasting, I think it's very unforgivable. I think the genre, when you look at it, is unforgivable to a lot of the actors of that time. Boris Karloff once said that playing the monster was a profitable mistake, but a mistake nonetheless. And he was very grateful for the part that enabled him to eat, basically, after years of struggle. But you find that when the genre kind of goes out of fashion, it can have a serious repercussions with the actors. So I was trying to emphasize that, and it was actually the death of Robert Quarry. I read that he was in a nursing home where he was actually where it was financed by his fans. And I just thought to myself, this is I just thought this is very a sad thing to happen. Beneath a great man, and I think he was a great actor, and an actor I'm always fascinated with. And that prompted me about the fact is, are they curse these people? So I ended up writing a book. It was a much larger book, or more people rather, but then I opted for the less is more and just jettisoned all but 5 and to write about them in better detail. So, and they've all had some kind of issues with, not just with, maybe the genre was part of it, but they all had issues of one kind or another. And we talk about, Lon Chaney Jr. for a good example. The man was, he always lived in the shadow of his, famous father. I mean, the great Lon Chaney. And you could say, I wouldn't say he was a great actor by any chance. And he was a drinker. He was a heavy drinker. And he hid this behind this very abrasive personality. And then, until the drink really took hold of him. And of course, he was improbably cast in several roles. He was Universal's horror star. Yeah. And then Wolfman was his signature role. When you see, I've got the Ghost of Frankenstein. I mean, he was certainly big enough to play the monster, but he just didn't have Karloff's wonderful facial features. I've got, interestingly enough, I've got his performance as Dracula in The Son of Dracula. And to be honest, I didn't think he was that bad. He was miscast. There was no doubt about that. Yeah. But he was. It turned out to be a very big, formidable, very much, it had a Christopher Lee presence about him. Where his height was certainly a vampire that wasn't afraid to get into a fight if need be. And for what it's worth, Son of Dracula does have a certain weird quality about it, which I like. It just makes you wonder what would the film be like if Lugosi had played the part.
Yeah, it is often overlooked. I agree. Yeah. It's very often overlooked. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but Christopher Lee as well, for a long time, was actually listed as the tallest actor in Hollywood at 6'5",
wasn't he?
Yeah, a towering presence. But like getting with Dracula, Bela Lugosi cemented himself, immortalized his role as Dracula. That almost every Dracula that came since has been compared to Lugosi.
It has been that. And what happened with Lugosi, I mean, I was going to go to Raph, but I'll jump to Lugosi since we're on the subject of him. Again, the typecasting was Dracula. It's like a stamp on him. You know, he felt he wasn't being able to show his mettle as an actor. With Lugosi, actually, he said he was a big star of the Hungarian theatre, and he worked extensively in German films. So he wasn't the biggest star that he makes himself out to be. I believe in Germany he did one of the original versions of Dr. Jekyll and Sister Hyde, one of Murnau's early works, which has been lost sadly. And then he moved to America, where he embarked on a reasonably successful stage career. Now, Dracula, it was a play, and it was written by Hamilton Dean, who was an Irish actor manager who came from the same part of Dublin as Bram Stoker and his wife Florence Stoker. It's interesting how vampire cinema stems from that, because literature, you had Stoker and J. Sheridan Le Fanu, both Dubliners. And you had a third Dubliner who wrote a play about Dracula, and it was written like a drawing room mystery. Hence, that's how it looks when you see the film. And at the time, it was a big success when in England. Then it got transferred and rewritten for Broadway, and then Lugosi took the part. And yes, it made him a big star. And then eventually the film came. Originally, Carl Emmerly wanted to do an adaptation of the film version, but due to I think there was a recession and depression rather, and it was really cheaper to do the play, and even Lugosi wasn't original choice to play the part. He did lobby for the role and got it. He did know the part backwards, so yes, it was a huge success. But I think with the fault of Lugosi, he was according to Boris Karloff, he never went out of his way to learn the English language, and of course it did hamper his later career as well. And of course, his extravagant living forced him to work, rather than kind of hold out for better roles. So you can imagine by the time of all, and of course that and his morphine addiction, that really undermined his career. It was a great sadness that very few good roles came his way, and it was certainly on the horror roles. I mean, as one said, I don't know, it was a critic who once said that if Lugosi, the only way Lugosi can get into a grade A picture is to buy a ticket to go to the cinema. Which is, sad but true. And of course, naturally, his association with Edward D. Wood kind of gave him the kind of cult.
I was going to say, let's not forget that he was in Plan 9 from Outer Space, which certainly is widely regarded, isn't it, as being one of the worst films of all time, but a film that was so bad that it does certainly have a cult following.
It's got a big cult following. It's really enjoyable for the wrong reasons.
Do you know what?
It's interesting when you talk. It's interesting when we talk about Lugosi. I did a talk on when I first got the Cursed Horror Stars published. I decided going to got promoted by a book talks, and I ended up there's a great place called the Castle Keep, which is in Newcastle, and it's actually opposite one of my favourite pubs in Newcastle as well. I just it's a coincidence, I wonder. And I did a talk on White Zombie, which is a very stylish, dated, but it's a very stylish zombie flick. And what made it interesting, this is a nice little story, but I had a friend of mine who was very much into the paranormal, and it was his first visit to the castle. He took the photographs, and he enjoyed the talk and the movie and so on. And I haven't got it. I've got to find it somewhere. It's stored up on one of my folders on my laptop. But it was what looked like a green kind of ectoplasmy type vision that was taken on one of the pictures, and I don't know, it looked like a very ghostly image, and I just wondered, was it Lugosi paying me a visit to see if I was listening to the talk? I hope he enjoyed it, because he hasn't haunted me, so I'm assuming he has. So yes, Lugosi, his problem was limited range and his morphine addiction, and we go the same with Peter Lorre, was a morphine addict as well. I mean, unlike Lugosi, he did go out of his way to learn the English language. He was a massive star of the Berlin stage. He was a toast of Berlin theatre, and especially with the works of Bertolt Brecht. So you can imagine the classical career he had. And of course, naturally, like a lot of Jewish actors, was forced to flee Germany for obvious reasons. And after doing a film with Hitchcock, The Man Who Knew Too Much, he then got contact with Hollywood. He did Mad Love and Crime and Punishment. And of course, you remember Laurie was, you think about The Maltese Falcon, Casablanca, The Mask of Demetrius, and Arsenic Old Age. He's been in some of the best movies ever made. Financial and morphine problems really did cause issues, and of course took a toll on his health. And with Lugosi, Like with Lugosi, he started having trouble getting further roles because he was briefly blacklisted for communist affiliations, and he returned to Germany. He directed an interesting movie called The Lost One. It was a pet project. Wasn't a success. Filming did take its toll on his health, and although he returned to an admiring audience returned to Hollywood from Germany, he made a bit of a comeback with obviously the Poe movies. Obviously, Vincent Price, but you can tell if you watch the films, he looked grossly overweight, not very well, and of course he died relatively young, 59. So it was a huge shame with that.
Yeah.
We talk about Basil Rathbone. Rathbone again, another classical theatre man, World War I hero. He did at home with Shakespeare as he was with contemporary theatre. Big toast of the West End, and of course eventually Broadway. And of course, Hollywood beckoned, and he was a star villain.
Yeah,
he was. If you look at The Adventures of Robin Hood, one of the all-time great movies, and naturally he landed the role of a lifetime as Holmes, and he kind of felt, although he did two very good films with 20th Century Fox, he did a load of second features, which are still great. I've got the box set, and of course he had a wife that spent money like it as if it went out of fashion.
Yeah.
So. But yeah, for his life, and eventually he felt Holmes was a bit of a noose around his neck, so he turned his back on Hollywood, returned to New York, acted on the stage, but he never quite had the same impact. And of course, financial situation forced him to work. But again, he made something of a little bit of a comeback with the Roger Corman films.
Yeah,
and of course, finally, Robert Quarry, the man who inspired me to write the book. I suppose he had a very interesting stage career. He was an actor since he was a child, did a lot of bit parts mostly, and then suddenly he lucked into the lead of playing Count Yorga. Initially it was a softcore porno film, but he said, I'll do the part if you cut the porno rubbish out and just play as a straight horror, which was a sure success. Yeah. I think horror and sex pretty much sold back then.
Yeah.
And it made him a star. And he was then signed by American National Pictures to be like the successor to Vincent Price, who was wanting to get out of the horror genre. But it proved that he came in at the wrong time, because those style of movies really were going out of fashion. So for him, he was very unlucky. And he also had several near-death experiences that really derailed his career. And naturally, he was had to rely on the support of his fans to get him to a nursing home when he was getting too old. So it was a huge, he was fortunate that he did make a bit of a comeback with a number of films with Fred Olen Ray that kept him working. So there was something, he had something there. So there's my 5 stars, where they all cursed. Yeah. Who knows?
Well, interesting. You get Peter Lorre. Now, I'll admit, I was very late in seeing this film. Now, this movie is considered to be a classic of its time, very controversial and daring for its time. M. 1933, I believe. Yes, great film. And
superb movie.
When you consider when that was released as well in the 1930s, to challenge audiences with such a subject matter.
It's frightening. I mean, it was based on real events about Peter Curtin.
The vampire of Dusseldorf. Yeah, that's it.
Yes, I did a talk on M. It was a very surreal experience, because you're talking about this remarkable movie. I did it again at the Castle Keep, and I found when I watched the film, there's one disturbing thing I found about watching it is. And it'll probably be taken out of context, so I'll get dropped. But the fact that Laurie certainly had a sympathetic side to him. He was obviously being driven by an inner compulsion to murder these kids, which makes, obviously is frightening in itself. But he projected a certain sympathetic image, which goes against the kind of, what would you expect? But it was interesting. Fritz Lang, I mean, he used a number of actors who were actually from the criminal underworld, because it was a case of, from what I read about the story about Peter Curtin, the criminal underworld did try to locate him. It was, it was obviously causing a lot of, it was giving them a bad name, you might say. And Lang certainly pieced together an incredible movie. I always remember there was, you normally get a round of applause after a film finishes, but M certainly didn't. I think there were just people who hadn't seen it, were genuinely shocked.
Yeah.
I've seen it twice, and I still...
And what's the tune that the killer whistles? The tune that the killer whistles, I can't hear that tune without thinking of the movie M. I'm just trying to recall what the actual tune is called. It's the tune that I can't remember what it's called, but again, it kind of puts a chilling twist on that song, on that piece of music.
It is. It is a truly disturbing film, worth watching. I would say. I would certainly. It's a bit like Schindler's List. I think you've got to bring yourself around to watching it, which I've never seen Schindler's List.
You
I know
haven't?
it's a brilliant film. I haven't. One day I will bring myself around to watching it. I just can't. I mean, M's are kind of like, in that respect, the Schindler's List of its day. You've really got to, if you want to watch it, you really got to force yourself to watch it.
Schindler's List. Yes, it's a great movie. It's one that, of all Steven Spielberg's films, of his very illustrious career, it's probably the most emotionally impactful, without a doubt.
Yes.
I
would say so. One day I'll watch it.
Yeah.
Don't know when.
I'll admit, every time I've seen it, it's just one of them films. I appreciate it so much, but due to the subject matter, I find it hard to watch with repeated viewings. It's not a film that I can return to too often.
Yes, just watch once.
Yeah.
Or maybe twice after getting over the initial shock. But I reckon that's about as much as you can.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned Fritz Lang as well, quickly getting on to them. I know I don't want to go too much off topic. One of the greatest sci-fi films of all time, Metropolis, which is like...
Again, another film. One of the nice things that I've done, I mean, not me actually doing talks and so on. I did the talk on M and Son of Dracula. I did one on that as well, and White Zombie. But at the Castle Keep, I'm obviously shamelessly plugging the place, but it was just a wonderful experience. We went to see a lot of silent movies, mainly German ones, to live music. Metropolis was one of them. I didn't see that one at the Castle Keep. I saw it at the Cathedral next door, actually, and they had a live rock band playing behind the screens at Metropolis, which is, I always say about Metropolis, if you didn't have Metropolis, you wouldn't have Fifth Element, which you can see in terms of the art decor was clearly Metropolis inspired. Now, some of the other films I've seen was A Cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
Oh, 1920. I've got that on Blu-ray. It looks incredible. The restoration.
The Golem. I've seen The Golem. I've seen Nosferatu. They're kind of like very standout movies. Haxan Witchcraft Through the Ages, the Swedish one.
Okay, not seen that.
It is worth seeing. It's a tad over long, but it's kind of semi-documentary.
Okay.
It was Benjamin Christiansen who made the movie, and it's just basically about witchcraft.
Yeah.
And of course, it's a full frontal nudity. This is talking about 1925. I think the film was out then.
Yeah.
So, but with them, they always played live music, and with Caligari, I've seen it twice to different music scores. I saw it was like almost like sounding like German electro. And it was very powerful, very, very. It really tied in with the darkness of the film, which is a weird. It's like it's a weird cartoon world that it's in. It's really remarkable. And the same with Nosferatu, although I will agree that maybe the music was a bit too dominant. I mean, to me, music must be incidental rather than dominant for a film like that. Again, but it's still a powerful movie. The Golem. I've got to bring this story in because I've discussed it with friends of mine who went with me to see it. They use sound effects. Okay. Now I don't know if you've seen The Golem, and I'll probably spoil it for you. So
I've never actually seen it. I've never actually seen it in its entirety. Funnily enough, I've never seen it from start to finish.
An outstanding movie. I mean, Paul Wegener plays The Golem, the clay monster of Jewish folklore, who's there to rescue the people of Warsaw, and there's a character in it because it's set obviously Middle Ages, and there's a character in it, a knight in shining armor called Florian. The name will always stick in my mind. He's this rather goofy, not very attractive knight, about the wimpiest knight ever. I mean, he's much worse than Sir Robin in Monty Python and the Holy Grail. This guy's and of course, he makes advances towards the rabbi's daughter, which, believe you me, she looked as though she could beat him up. And what they did was he used coughing and sneezing noises every time he came on the scene, and eventually he falls foul of the Golem, which he really didn't have to do much except poke him in the eye. But I mean, throwing him off a turret was too good for him. And they just made coughing and sneezing. So if I ever watch that film again and see that particular character, it will just be stuck in my mind. So I've warned you. You're going to watch it. You're going to think, somebody sneezing.
Does it actually have a Blu-ray release? Does it have a Blu-ray release in the UK? Okay.
I've got no idea. It's certainly. It's something I have to check. I mean, I know silent films aren't a bit more like curiosity.
Yeah,
I mean, comedy, horror,
I think I only own 5 silent. Actually, speaking of silent films, another film I'd like to mention. Actually, 1927, I believe it was Hitchcock's third movie, The Lodger.
Oh, right.
Which,
I know of it. I don't think I've seen it.
I think that's a good film, because what that movie does, it actually sets a lot of the conventions, a lot of the themes in the movie become very, very prevalent in a lot of Hitchcock's later movies. So it kind of set the template for a lot of his later films. It's a good film. It was loosely inspired by the Jack the Ripper murders. A woman becomes convinced that her new lodger is the murderer. I believe the murderer in the film is known as the Avenger. Interestingly, I'm sure you know about Hitchcock, he had a penchant for blonde women.
Yes, yes, indeed, yes.
And the women in this film are being targeted are blonde in this movie as well. Yes. So yeah, it's a good Hitchcock movie. It's one I'd recommend.
I'm always open to any kind of movies and so on.
Well, you've already mentioned two films I haven't seen. It's so
yeah. But obviously with the book, naturally you get, when it came to the journey, I'll briefly talk about our writing journey as I do with various book talks. It hasn't been the easiest of journeys, because one thing is I have battled clinical depression. I've gone through you go through bad moments where you don't write anything and so on. Music kept me going for a little bit. I do play a little bit of guitar. And I did run a music night for quite a few years. These things kind of keep me going. And I just found that, it was a difficult journey, because when I first started writing, I thought, right, I want to write a book, and I had this reference book, and I thought, well, okay, I've got the idea. What do I do next? Yeah. And it was absolutely frightening. I was like, oh my God. And this was the day before internet and so on. Before all that. So if I wanted to research, or and I suppose I've got no qualms about that. Is at the time, books, or borrow books from libraries, can't buy them, whether it's brand new or second hand, which probably explains why I've got a massive collection of movie-related books. But when I took a bit of a direction by subscribing to the Writing magazine, and the Writing magazine introduced me to a writers' retreat, which is based at the Hayes Conference Centre in Swanwick in Derbyshire, one of the longest running writers' retreats. It's on every August. Naturally, last year it had to be cancelled for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
And I decided to give it a go. I could meet people like me who are starting out. I could meet established people who could be encouraging. So it was kind of like a nice balance. And I also had guest speakers over the years. I'm trying to think of some. I'm going to reel off some well-known ones. You're going to say who, but Peter James, I think, is really very well known, crime writer. And I've got friends of mine who got loads of his books, and I've had the fortune to meet him twice. I'm trying to think of Deborah Mugar, who wrote The Best Exotic Marigold Hotel, which has been made into a film. One of my big favorite actors at the moment is Bill Nighy. I could just watch him in anything.
Oh, yeah, gotta love Bill Nighy. Yeah,
I can't stop laughing. Even in serious stuff, I just burst out laughing. Yeah. So, and it was a bit overwhelming at first, because I just thought, am I really cut out for this? Because by that time, the internet it's part of life now, and writing had become a very technical medium, and it was a case of, am I really cut out for it? But then I just thought to myself, it was something that was mentioned in Peter Cushing's autobiography, when he said that, Sir Walter Raleigh, he achieved his ambitions, or at least some, so why can't why can't I? And I just thought, why not? And then I had the idea for Cursed Torres Star. So I just felt that writing, I had to do it. And if it meant sacrificing holidays abroad, which I have done, I went to the Writers' Review every year, until finally Telos Publishing. And Telos specializes in a lot of horror, fantasy related stuff, both non-fiction and non-fiction, and obviously with cult television and cult movies. Yeah. And they said yes. I always remember the time I said yes. They said yes. I was in absolute shock. They said, we can't. It's only a small publishing company. We only offer you a small advance, and so on and so on. But if you're interested, we'll do the contracts for you. And I'm sitting there saying, I don't care if it's a big advance.
For real, yeah.
It's the idea of getting a book in print. It didn't matter. It was in print, and so I basically said yes. And I was very fortunate, because I had an ex-girlfriend of mine who actually lived over the road from me. Although we split up, we were still mates. And I always remembered calling it, sending a message saying, "Are you free tonight? I need to see you." And she said, "Yes, I'm free." She I think she knew what it was, women's intuition.
Yeah.
I had someone to go over the contract with me, someone who knew a bit about legal stuff, being an accountant, and just and copious amounts of red wine later. We were both blind drunk by that time. It was just a celebration. But it was such an amazing experience to get that. And it was honestly, it was terrifying for a while. Only told a few close friends because I thought something's going to go wrong. And then eventually it did come out, and then you found yourself saying, "I'll start telling more people." And eventually, when it came out, I put on Facebook, I remember saying, "For those of you who know, my book's out. For those of you who didn't know, I've written a book."
Yeah.
And that's when I took the next step, feeling that just because it's been written, I just felt I needed to go out and promote myself. And I've been very fortunate. It came out in 2015, but the following year, I started doing book talks mainly at the castle, but I also got involved for a dear friend of mine who's sadly no longer with us, a guy called Chris Phipps, who was associate producer on the TV series The Tube.
Okay.
And has written some wonderful books on film and TV in the Northeast and his time on the Tube. He got me involved in the Whitley Bay Film Festival of 2016, and then the Newcastle Book Festival, which was to me very prestigious. So in a short space of time, I was doing a lot of stuff and SciCon conventions and so on. I like going to them, but I really feel better to do talks.
Yeah.
And it put me in a good position when book 2 came out. I'd already had the idea for it. I'd written a piece for Shadowlocked, Vincent Price, The British Connection, which just focused on his British-made movies. And then I decided to expand it into book form. And hence it was, and Telos, naturally, were very happy with me promoting myself with local talks, obviously, because having a job in the civil service, I can only do so much. They took this one on, and sure enough, March last year, that one came out. And again, it's really, it's a biography, but more on he had very strong links. He had very strong links to England, naturally not just his ancestry, but he was an art student at the Coulthard Institute of Art in London. And then it was in London he made his debut at the Gate Theatre. And suddenly he projected himself to a leading role as Prince Albert. So he became really much a new star for the English theatre, but because he was a student and a foreigner, he couldn't work. He couldn't do legitimate theatre. And eventually he was part of the Helen Hayes, who was America's first lady of the stage. She got involved in a Broadway production of Victoria Regina, which when he played out Prince Albert, and of course he came back over to Broadway a huge star. But then he carried on in learning his craft, and he became a member of Orson Welles' Mercury Theatre for a while. And it led on to Hollywood came, and of course there was English characters. I know he played Walter Raleigh in Elizabeth and Essex, and I know he played Charles II. I don't know if it's a royal scandal or not. I mean, I'm not that. I can't remember that much. So he did play British characters, and of course, naturally in the 50s he started getting into horror films. He did the Roger Corman films. So with that, and of course the 60s he was doing a lot of traveling, making a lot of films in Europe. And then American International Pictures set up a base in the UK, and then out came Mask of the Red Death. So the first half of the book was his life, and then the second half, his first British movie. I just focus on each movie. Which don't hate me for saying this. I actually did a podcast a little while ago, only about a week and a half ago, on my top 10 60s horror movies. And that is where I announced that I had not seen Mask of the Red Death, released in 64, directed by Roger Corman. I know I need to watch it. I've seen Witchfinder General, and again, a great movie, 68. I need to watch Mask of the Red Death, and it is on Blu-ray, and I'm going to go ahead and make that purchase. Go for it, because it is a very good film. You can see Corman was at the time getting very tired of the way the series was going, and he was starting to spoof it with my favourite story in Tales of Terror, The Black Cat, which I do like my red wine, I've got to be honest, but every so I always think about my favourite scene in that movie when when Vincent Price as Fortunato Lucrezi and played by Laurie. Absolutely remarkable performance by Laurie. Totally stole the show from Vinny. And I always just like the scene when they have Vinny doing the exaggerated, making facial expressions and sipping it and smelling it and saying, "Oh, this is a Chateau Latour 1812." A bit heavy for a Margot. So and Laurie would just like drink bottle for bottle. "Oh, don't be stingy, give me more." And he totally matches in bottle for bottle. It's just a wonderful scene. I love it. He did the same with The Raven. With Mask of the Red Death, Corman had a chance to take the series I think he took it as far as he can by doing something in England where he felt using new actors and technicians, he had something of something he could produce that was more interesting. And I think Mask, outstanding costumes. Nicholas Roeg was the director of photography.
Yeah, Don't Look Now, great film.
Exactly. So you had some quality people there. Laura Nightingale did the magnificent costumes and so on. And Vinny, I mean, up until then, I think Vinny was playing kind of pathetic characters when you think about it. Always been, driven by fate and so on. And it's really, he had a chance to play a really overt villain, a very handsome, debonair villain, very pious in his beliefs. And I find it was one of his more interesting characters he played. He couldn't be far away from Roderick Usher or Dr. Aramis and the Raven and characters like that. He was very much an interesting, very interesting villain, an interesting character to play. And of course, he did Tomb of Ligeia, which again was the final Corman movie, again made in England, and again an excellent film. And then after a couple of years of doing Dr. Goldfoot and the Girl Bombs, garbage. He did some garbage. Again, it was because he was an art expert. He went out for Sears and Roebuck. He was buying artwork for them. So it was like he was using his expense money. Buy.
I think we can let him off, can't we? He'd already established himself as, He
was under a contract, and it was someone called Sam Arkoff. He said that. With the expense money he was given, he'd think he was like living the high life, but he found himself like living in some pokey little guest house for a fraction of the amount. Is what he'd had just to buy artwork. I believe it's called fraud, but it didn't matter. and of course, eventually, we all know about Witchfinder General. He returned to England for that. And again, the making of the film's as interesting as the actual film itself, because we know about the less than amicable relationship he had with Michael Reeves. And again, it just makes good. It was just, and again, it was I think it's one of the few dislikable characters he played. His villains always had a bit of niceness about them, and the only other character I found dislikable was when he did Shelby Carpenter in Laura. Again, a total sleazebag, which awful person, but great performance. And naturally, then he had this unbroken run of great movies. He did The Oblong Box, he did Scream and Scream Again, Cry of the Banshee. Oblong Box was his first movie with Christopher Lee, and they became best of friends. And then later, the Dr. Phibes films came, and actually the next, probably his other definitive one was Theatre of Blood, which, I
believe is your favourite, right?
It is my favourite, indeed, yes. It was very hard. What's your favourite movie? It's very hard. He's done some great ones. He's done some bad ones, which he's been great in. But I have to say, Theatre of Blood was just, to me, it was an absolutely great movie. I would say for any students, it's a wonderful way to be introduced to Shakespeare.
Yeah, definitely. And
you can imagine, you can see the element of fun. He had a chance to work with actors who have done Shakespeare before, very, very prominent actors. And as he said, to him being an American playing like 8 Shakespearean roles was just worth it. And I just think his master of disguise, I mean, his Shylock was incredible. I think that was one of his best Shakespearean interpretations. His Butch the Hairdresser was certainly worthy of a Carry-On film.
He
was just because he playing like contemporary characters, like the Gordon Ramsay Take Notes, This Is Your Dish. It's just a wonderful just a wonderful performance. And I think you just couldn't get better. And eventually he did Madhouse with Peter Cushing. Which I couldn't guilty pleasure for that, but I felt it could have been better for the casting. And then after a bit of a break, he returned to the theatre with Diversions and Delights, playing Oscar Wilde. And actually did a lot of television and so on. He was on The Muppet Show. He worked with Cushing in a radio series called Aliens of the Mind. And then eventually he did a trio of fairly indifferent comedy horrors. He did Monster Club, which I have a soft spot for.
Yeah, I'll admit. Donald Pleasance was in that, wasn't he?
He was indeed, yes. And John Carradine, yes. I think I said about the Monster Club, it's like, it's not a good film. It's not a great film, not a good film. It's a pretty lousy film, but watch it.
Yeah, it's got charm to it. It's fun.
It's a fun film. The actors are enjoying themselves. In spite of what people say, I didn't think the music was that bad. I've heard worse.
Oh, yeah, certainly. Yeah.
It went right downhill if they played the Spice Girls.
Yeah.
And then eventually did House of Long Shadows with obviously Cushing, Lee, and Carradine.
What a cast!
The great Sheila Keefe.
Yeah.
What a cast, and another great movie. They all agreed with the critics. And we mustn't forget Sheila Keefe, who was definitely the great old Harridan in several Peter Walker movies, who looked totally in place with the rest of with the great cast. I always remember someone said that John Carradine, he was 77, and yet Price and Cushing were just early 70s, 71.
Yeah.
I mean, he's supposed to play their dad.
Yeah.
So I always remember someone said, don't you think he looks about 100 years old? And I thought, yeah, he does. So actually, really, he doesn't look that out of place.
No.
And then, of course, finally, Bloodbath at the House of Death, which deserves a bit of reevaluation.
Yeah.
And then, naturally, after that, I suppose he did Michael Jackson's Thriller and he did Edward
Which,
Scissorhands
again, you can understand why. I mean, Vincent Price had such a distinctive voice. You hear his voice, you know who it is.
Exactly. The story was he only got paid a flat fee for that. He had no royalties from it, so he never made really anything out of Thriller.
Yeah.
And he tried to get more money out. Eventually, Michael Jackson did a rather pathetic way of saying, making up for it by giving him some platinum albums, which he hated, and eventually auctioned them off.
Yeah.
And without trying to be controversial here, but this is, haven't he said that I think there was a first child abuse scandal that got paid off quietly or something like that, and Vinny's last word on that was, I got screwed by Michael Jackson. I never got a penny for it. In this kind of sort of way. So,
great music video, though. Great music video.
It is great music.
John Landis directed it, didn't he? Off American Wealth in London.
It was just ruined for me by the Lenny Henry version where the werewolf turns into Michael Jackson.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
It's hilarious.
All right.
He reacts the entire scene taking his girlfriend home as a werewolf.
Yeah.
And then when the full moon comes out, he turns into Michael Jackson, and it just killed it for me, I'm afraid.
I remember the Vincent Price episode you were talking about on the Muppets, where Kermit the Frog was dressed up as Count Dracula, from what I recall.
Indeed, yes, I always remember that. Yes, that was absolutely great. Absolutely brilliant. And I'll show you this. I'm very proud of this. Victoria Price.
Oh, his daughter.
Right, his daughter, yes, who had the good fortune to meet a couple of years ago at the Darlington Film Club. A lot of their events are organised by the Misty Moon Corporation, which is Stuart and Jen Morris, who I've never met, but seem like a very nice couple. I think Robin Asquith is very much involved in it as well as a patron. And they do a lot of events, and of course they had it's at the Music Forum in Darlington. It might be a bit of a trek for you, but I always recommend it. And I had a chance to meet them after watching The Pit and the Pendulum. And it was a great. Awesome. I mentioned in the epilogue of my book. I told a little bit of a story about when I first actually got to meet Victoria. She's a lovely lady. She's a very nice person. And I also got to know through her Peter Fuller from the Vincent Price UK Legacy. And I had been fortunate enough to meet Peter. For real, not on Zoom. It was he was on holiday with his partner, and we met in Newcastle. It was great to chat with him, and it was just like she's just a really nice lady. You can tell straight away she's got a great love and respect for her dad. She's a daddy's girl, without a doubt, but she was a very, very nice lady, and we got see The Pit and the Pendulum. It was a great movie. So I had to show you that. It wasn't great. Got the bright light in front of me. You can just about make it out, but yes. And so I've been so fortunate for that, and I would just say, unfortunately, I've not really had much chance to promote the book with COVID, but I've done a couple of Zoom things. And one thing I will mention, although a lot of it's still pie in the sky, but something that kind of worth promoting on YouTube. I'm being involved. The Morpeth Library is planning their first literary festival next year, to which I'm involved with. They asked me. I know the organizer well, and I'm getting involved with that. Now they're actually having people like Anne Cleves and Ian Rankin. As part of it. Now that's as much as I know at the moment. It's still waiting for funding and so on. So it's something for April next year. If you ever want, I'll let you know. You can plug it. And Darlington Film Club. I know James Watson, who's again a lovely guy, and he's got me involved. Possibly in November until things come back in the open again and people can meet up. I'm going to do a talk there. So that's two events at the moment, and we'll just see what happens, and hopefully I'm planning a book launch again we got the venue. We're just waiting and seeing. It won't happen a lot.
Yeah.
Autumn,
well, clearly you're an ardent fan, and clearly it's good. You took that plunge, and it certainly, I think it helps with confidence as well, doesn't it? It's something.
I think it does. Interesting people say that. When I'm sitting there talking about, you talk about it absolutely glowingly. Well, of course, I'm proud of what I've done and so on, and it feels like a real sense of achievement doing the book. It's very difficult to get published. I go to a writing. There's a lot of people who naturally, a lot of newcomers. If I can help them in any way to say it can happen, it doesn't matter. You're kind of hoping that I'll get published younger and then I can become a millionaire and live on a yacht and so on. But 50 isn't a bad age to get your first book published.
No, exactly. And you've got the passion, clearly, you've got the knowledge, and it's being put to use. And you're clearly, you are one of the most passionate people I've spoken to regarding what you're into, certainly. So it's like you certainly know your stuff.
I like to think so. I mean, I'll mention We Belong Dead as well, because with COVID, it has kind of knocked a few. I know it's knocked a lot of people have not been able to write. Some have been. I've been working on a project. I'm working on a few projects, and I'll mention this. I've got to plug it. This is one of the books I've got, which is from the We Belong Dead magazine. Okay. Which you might be.
Now, am I correct in saying this? This is a homage to Dr. Terror's House of Horror.
It's to homage to Amicus.
Amicus in general. Yeah.
It's Darryl Buxton and Eric McNaughton, who are the men behind We Belong Dead, are doing a series of books, and I've just contributed several chapters to it. Okay. I've done 2 for that particular book, and I'm doing some for others that are out. There's going to be a book on Hammer out in July.
Oh, okay.
Which I've 4 chapters on, and which again has just kept me, it's kept me in the loop with actually writing. During especially COVID has been a very, very difficult time for a lot of people. And, and it's kind of thing that has kept me a bit sane.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Well, people notice that. Yeah. How passionate I am. Yeah.
We're quickly to get back to Vincent Price. Actually, I just want to quickly say a couple of my favourite Vincent films as well that I love. I love House of Wax from 1953. And I also love House of Usher, Fall of the House of Usher as well.
That was the one that really that really made him the king of horror. He did films with William Castle a couple of years earlier.
Yeah.
And I reckon in terms of actual true American Gothic, suddenly they had someone on the lines of Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee in the UK, the man that was completely on par with them.
Yeah.
And again, it was just American International Pictures were doing lots of those sci-fi movies, lots of UFO invasions and so on. So they took a bit of a risk to spend a fair bit of money, Barry Sanders, to create a Gothic horror, and somehow it worked.
It's a great, it's got a very kind of dreamlike quality to it. I absolutely love it. Again, visually, it's just fantastic.
It's just, but when he had someone like Floyd Crosby, who was the cinematographer, he was an Oscar winner. And was on Corman's payroll for these movies. And Daniel Haller, who was a great art director, somehow his directorial career, although he was never out of work, never quite hit the scales of his artwork, but still not as distinguished, but still a great person to have. And you had people like Les Baxter doing the music. Not quite to James Bernard at Hammer, but still the exotic movement with the jazz period that he did. It was an amazing. He had just an amazing team of people, and of course, Vincent Price as that main star was just absolutely incredible.
He was
I just liked how it is.
Speaking of Castle, he was in The Tingler, wasn't he?
The Tingler, yes, and Castle, and my favourite, The House on Haunted Hill.
Yes, 1959. One of my favourite haunted house films to this day.
It's a great one. I did a piece for We Belong Dead for a previous book, and I had the idea about haunted house movies. You've got 3 types. Well, so usually 2 types of horror. You've got the horror and the comedy films, like Bob Hope comedy. And you have 3 different types of horror movies. You have the one where you're not sure it's haunted. I think my favourite examples is The Innocents, Jack Clayton's The Innocents.
That was in my top 10 60s, by the way. Yeah.
It's a superb movie. You just wondered, is it all in her mind? And I think the same thing applies with the Haunting.
Also in there. Yeah.
Yes, again, it was Julie Harris imagining it or not. So that's the kind where you're not sure. And then you have the ones where you know it's haunted. Legend of Hell House is a great example.
Yeah, and Roddy McDowell. Yeah.
Yeah, and also I did a talk for the for the 2019 Whitley Bay Film Festival, I did a talk on The Uninvited with Ray Milland, which is clearly a haunted house film.
Yeah.
You know, the ghosts are there. And so the ghosts don't have to be there to know that it's haunted.
Yeah.
And the final one, and I think this is where the Hound of Haunted Hill kind of falls under, is the Scooby-Doo one. You know, you know, it's haunted, but it isn't really, because there's some stash of loot or something daft happening, and they get a load of meddling kids solve it, and there you go. That's it. It's Scooby-Doo territory. And that's where the House on Haunted Hill is. Well, I always regard this film as vintage Vinny.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, it is. It's one of my favourite performances of his.
The persona that he has, you know, it's like, you know, he's always the handsome, elegant.
But I love the hate between him and his wife.
Yeah.
I just love it. And obviously in the remake, isn't it? It's Jeffrey Rush and Famke Janssen. Probably not worth talking about, but yeah.
I've said about Jeffrey Rush, and no disrespect him, because he is a very, very good actor, and he plays very kind of Vincent Price type character roles. And I always said to me, there's only one actor who can play a Vincent Price role, and it's Vincent Price. Simple as that. But with that one, I mean, he got the moustache. The moustache became a trademark feature of that. He was always well dressed, ever the popular, the debonair host. You know, there's obviously something sinister going on, and but he's got that flamboyant look about him. He's got that. He basically encapsulates everything that makes a Vincent Price character. He's got all that, and and it just works so brilliant in House on Haunted Hill. It's daft as anything. But who cares? It's just
exactly. It's just fun. Exactly, good sense of atmosphere and that. And I've mentioned this on podcasts before and that. I have a profound love for black and white. I just love black and white. There's like a purity to it. You know, I think the Twilight Zone is where my love stems from for black and white. I used to watch that show religiously.
Of course, Outer Limits was a very close second in terms of the same kind of style, a bit more creepier. I think with black and white, you can make a great use of black and white. I suppose nowadays it's an art form, like Schindler's List, for example, or Ed Wood, or Woody Allen's Zelig. Was it The Artist, a silent movie?
The Artist,
black and white. But actually, Pleasantville, I would say, is a good example.
Oh yes, as well. Pleasantville, overlooked film, actually, often forgotten about.
Very overlooked. That's a great movie, and maybe one of these films I'm going to have to add to my DVD collection.
Yeah,
and I just find it's black and white has its. I mean, to me, a film, if it's a good film, I don't care if it's black and white. Color, it is good, and you would say I do love the Universal monster movies. I do have a soft spot for Son of Dracula.
Yeah.
Though it was watching it, I did a talk on Chaney, and I was sitting there with my friends watching it, and one of my friends, a nice guy, he made an observation which I cannot now. It's totally sexist, but unfortunately, it can't be Julie. He pointed out that during the party sequence, they're having the party. He knows that the two lead actresses, which was Louise Albritton and Evelyn Ankers, he said, they're not wearing any underwear. And you go, really? Yes, have you noticed? They're wearing very tight. They're not wearing. I had a look. Damn right you are. So maybe it's worth watching again. So that's it. I've probably ruined it for you. Watch it again, and you're going to see if I'm right or not.
I'll have to do it when the fiance's not with me, because I don't want to get her. Yeah.
I do have a soft spot for when you talk about silent movies, the Spanish language Dracula.
Yes, very efficiently, Matt. Yes, very good. Yeah. I've actually heard some people say that, because obviously both released in 1931, right? Yeah. That some people actually prefer the Spanish version to the Universal.
I suppose I prefer it, to be honest. It's a lot longer. Carlos Valerius, I think he was a pretty effective Dracula. He wouldn't please everybody, but he did have that rather goofy intensity, which makes him think he looked like a real animal compared to Debonair Lugosi. And I thought that the actresses were damn sight more sexy. I've got to be honest. Little Peter Tovar, who was, I think she was 106 when she died, not a couple of years back.
Oh, wow.
And so she got rediscovered later on. I mean, she retired from acting to marry Paul Conant, and she didn't act again. But suddenly this film after being years lost, has been rediscovered, and it's getting an audience. And I think it may not please everybody, but I do believe it's worth watching.
Well, it's actually included on the Dracula Universal box set, which is really
that as well.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to test your Vincent Price knowledge. I think you're going to know the answer to this.
No.
I don't think you'll even have to think. Vincent Price voiced a villain in a Disney animated movie.
Oh,
what was
course. It? And it was another strong link to his British connection as well, because it's set in England. It was definitely, he played the dreaded Rattigan.
He did, yeah.
Basil the Great Mouse Detective.
That's correct. Yeah, that's right. I knew you'd get often overlooked. I think it's
often overlooked.
Yeah, not one of the greats or anything like that, but he's the best thing in that film. Rattigan, Vincent Price.
He said he had to audition for Disney, and he said if it wasn't for that it was Disney, I would have felt offended.
Yeah,
he was very much interested, because one of his last films, again another strong British one, was The Thief and the Cobbler.
Okay.
Which has been even more overlooked. It was a Richard Williams animated. Richard Williams did the animations for films like Casino Royale and Charles Lightning, and of course the Pink Panther movies, and naturally Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Oh, great film! Yeah,
this was a work in progress for 20 odd years, and thanks to Roger Rabbit, he got the backing to complete it. And it was set, Thief and the Cobbler, set an Arabian Nights style movie, and Vinny plays the Emperor Zigzag.
Yeah,
great voice. He did the voices back in the early 70s. Sadly, for reasons that the studio, because it went over budget, it was taken out of his hands. It was redone, and he added other animated sequences, and they turned it into a musical and so on. And eventually, it was released under the Arabian Nights, and it bombed very badly. And Williams became a bitter man. But what happened was, it's called the recobbled cut. There was lots of voice changes, because we had people like Windsor Davies, Kenneth Williams, Joan Sims, Clive Revel, all like voices for the movie. I believe it was revoiced several times. Donald Pleasance was a voice as well. I mean, I think only Vincent Price, Kenneth Williams, and Windsor Davies were the only ones that were retained for the final version. It was recobbled. Yeah. And what they did was they followed all of the storyboards, and eventually it was re-released to more critical acclaim.
Okay.
And so it was a shame. So that was, you could say, it was last movie that was released, although he done the voiceovers during the time he was doing Dr. Fides.
Yeah. So what year was that released? Because I know that Edward Scissorhands was released in 1990, released at the end of 1990. Obviously, he played the creator. So was this film actually released after that?
I think it was, without looking at my book. I don't want to.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm looking at my book and saying, "Hang on, where was it released?"
Yeah.
No, it was about. I think it was released after that. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it was his last movie. Was a TV film, acting wise, was Heart of Darkness with Dennis Hopper. Just a small role.
Oh, okay.
But his last cinema release was sadly Edward Scissorhands.
Yeah. And, correct me if I'm wrong. Was he in an episode of Columbo?
He was. I've got a box set of Columbo. He wasn't a murderer.
Wasn't he? I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
He was just in it. He was like a guest star. Just another person who Columbo annoys. But he wasn't a murderer, if I can remember.
Yeah.
It wasn't one of the better episodes, I'm afraid, but it was still. He was still there. I mean, he was always, there on TV. He was always popping in and out of stuff. I remember seeing him in the Brady Bunch, and of course in the '60s. He's doing F Troop. He was doing Voice at the Bottom of the Sea. Naturally, you could forget Egghead in Batman.
Yes, yes. I'm a huge Batman fan, by the way. I grew up watching that '60s TV show and then the '92 animated series.
I've got the little time for the newer ones. I mean, yes, I've seen Tim Burton's take on it when it started, but the superhero films I'm not interested in at all. But to me, you've got to have Adam West and Burt Ward. And you can't get better than Cesar Romero as a Joker, and obviously Burgess Meredith.
Who was in 4 episodes of The Twilight Zone as well. Burgess Meredith was a frequent on there. Julie Newmar. There was actually 3 Catwomen, weren't there? There was Eartha Kitt, Julie Newmar, and Lee Merriweather.
That's right.
Yeah, 3.
Who was in the movie version? It wasn't Mary Tyler Moore. Was it Lee Merriweather?
No, it was. It was Lee Merriweather.
Yeah, okay. I wasn't entirely sure.
Or was it Julie Newmar? It was one of those two. I think it was Lee Merriweather for the film. That's the movie that gave us the best Bat gadget ever, which was the shark repellent spray.
Yes. a moment I'll never ever forget.
The rubber shark on.
Yes. Quick, Robin, get me the Bat's anti-shark repellent spray. I've got a shark hanging off my foot.
Yeah, brilliant. But
you couldn't make it up, but it was still fun.
Yeah, so yeah, I used to watch that a lot. Now, just quickly, are there any modern horror films? Are there any movies, say, within the last 10 to 15 years that you've really come to like?
Right. Okay. First thing, I don't like very modern horror films. I do find the Saw movies. I don't like them. I've seen them. They're very clever. They're very well made. I'm not knocking them. And the Hostel movies, I don't like.
Yeah.
I just find them. It's like torture porn, I would say.
It is in a way. Saw did kind of like essentially kickstart that whole kind of subgenre.
Yeah. So I'm not keen on it. I like something with a sense of humor. I mean, I do like Reanimator. I mean, Jeffrey Combs is probably the nearest thing we got to a Vincent Price type flamboyant character.
Yeah.
I would say, it's funny. I've got Friday the 13th, and I've realised how 1979 how tame it is, and Zombie Flesh Eaters as well. I'm a big fan of Romero's work with Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead, Land of the Dead. Like I'm not too keen on his very late ones. I think for me, the one film I do enjoy is Ravenous.
Oh, yes. A very overlooked film starring Robert Carlyle about cannibalism.
Robert Carlyle, Guy Pearce, Jeffrey Jones, David Arquette, a very good cast. Now, I remembered watching the Blair Witch Project and getting a stinking headache from it. They're saying, is it frightening? I've read stories about people not being afraid to go to sleep at night and having the lights on and all that. Well, I just went home and went to bed and took a paracetamol. I needed to. The following week, and I'd already read it it was Shivers magazine about Ravenous. I thought, this sounds like a more interesting movie. I watched it, and it's a great film. I've got it on. I bought it on video at the time. I've got it on DVD. I've even got the soundtrack, which I think is one of the creepiest soundtracks ever. And it's really interesting that it was a collaboration between Michael Nyman and Blur's Damon Albarn.
Yeah.
So it goes to show there's more to Damon Albarn than playing in an indie band. It's a great, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
I think any more modern ones, I'm not entirely. I remember seeing a daft one, a Piranha 3D I saw, and I just thought that was absolutely hilariously bad, but it was still fun. Yeah. I think the latter half of the movie was people shouting "Get out of the water," which was like the entire script.
I think with horror, with like modern horror, it's good horror films still exist. They do get released, but it's kind of like the rough with the smooth. Being a horror fan, you have to take a lot of rough with the smooth, and for every good horror film, there's probably about 5 to 10 bad ones. I watched one last night, a British horror movie released just last year called Saint Maud. Yeah, it's received a lot of critical acclaim. Its reviews have generally been very good. I watched it last night, went in with quite high expectations due to the praise. I thought it was really good. But it's one of them movies. It's a very slow burning film that probably isn't accessible to everyone.
Right. Well, I was watching one and I've forgotten the title of it, but it's a portmanteau featuring Martin Freeman. What's the film called?
A horror film with Martin Freeman.
Yes.
Hang on. Ghost Stories.
Yeah. That's it. Yes, thank you. A simple thing I can't remember. It was, watching it, thinking, it could be like another portmanteau style with Amicus. And although it began well enough, it was certainly promising. I was left extremely disappointed.
Oh, I really liked it. It's interesting. Yeah, I liked how it was constructed. I like how there were loads of little clues peppered throughout, and it was kind of like I didn't notice everything upon a first time viewing because it's based on a stage play. I've heard the stage plays.
I would enjoy the stage play more. I just kind of felt I didn't go in there with such massive high expectations. It was given, and I just thought, I'm going to watch it, see how it goes. Yeah. And somehow it just didn't quite. Yeah, it didn't quite do it for me, I'm afraid, unfortunately.
Okay. No, that's fair enough. No, that's it. I always say this every time I do a list on a podcast. At the end of the day, if people like something and I don't, that's fine. If we all like the same things, the world would be a boring place. And I find when you've sometimes got different opinions, it makes for an interesting debate.
Well, I'm going to mention a film called Carnival of Souls because we have a mutual friend who does like it. We'll not say her name. She loves the movie, and I'm going to say it is a great film. And it's amazing when you look at very, very lower than low budget movies like that, for all the creakiness. And again, black and white photography really enhanced it. For all the creaky moments that sometimes ropey acting and so on, you get yourself something that's so dreamlike.
Yeah.
And so effective that it does stick in your mind. And that's something I do like about a lot of smaller independents who can make a film like that. I mean, Texas Chainsaw Massacre isn't a great film by any means, but it certainly packed a punch, and that's what you wanted.
Yeah, it caused quite the impact. It's easy to see why. I mean, I'm glad you brought up Carnival of Souls because I did a podcast on that a little while ago. It's a film that I love. Right. It has a very Twilight Zone aesthetic to it as well. It basically feels like it's an extended Twilight Zone episode almost. And it was directed.
It can work.
Directed by a guy who the only film he ever made. He specialised in what kind of videos were they now? In
he did those industrial movies.
That's right.
I've seen loads of them when I did my YTS, public information films about, how to handle tractors and so on, that kind of stuff. And get yourself.
And he just wanted to make a movie. He just basically wanted to make a film for as cheap as possible. And they made a film. It received very little attention when it came out, but it's gone on to amass a cult following among horror fans.
Well, it was the same thing. George Romero did TV commercials and so on.
Yeah.
I mean, the pair of them, both him and Herc Harvey, because he had friends that were working in the kind of film and television business too. They had access to the gear to make themselves a movie. Had access to people who were willing, semi-professionals who were willing to sort of like appear in them as well, or double up as makeup artists on top of that and so on. And they both had. Well, in the case of Romero, he had two professional actors. Herc Harvey only had the one, which is Candice Hillgross. I think Romero had Dwayne Jones and Judith O'Dea. The rest of them were just amateurs, and it just worked.
For
all its some of the creaky moments, it worked brilliantly. So I have to say, I've got to mention Carnival of Souls.
That was one. Night of the Living Dead I probably saw when I was probably around about 8 or 9 years old, and it absolutely terrified me. I watched it late at night on my own. I remember being the bona fide little rebel I am, sneaking downstairs, putting that film on, and it just absolutely terrified. It's like you say, it's all in the execution. It's all, you can have the simplest concept on paper, but as long as it's executed right, you can have a hit on your hands.
That's very true. And I was a bit of a purist. I wasn't into slasher movies as in my older days. I was very much. It was Hammer. It was all Gothic castles and so on. I kind of got to appreciate it a little bit later on. I mean, I wouldn't have dreamed of watching a film like Friday the 13th when I was in my teens. I think I was a bit out of place with a lot of people. I was watching Cushing and Price and Lee and Karloff and Hammer films, Amicus films, and for the most part, most kids my age would do their best to sneak into a movie to watch. Some lunatic getting in a Yogi Bear outfit and a meat cleaver, just stalking some statuesque overage schoolgirl. It just wasn't my kind of movie at all. When I watch them now, and like I said, I watched Friday the 13th and I watched Zombie Flesh Eaters, they're pretty tame. With Zombie the Flesh Eater, I hasten to add, I still close my eyes with the eyeball scene.
The eye gouging scene, which
I just wait.
That becomes synonymous, you know.
So I can open my eyes again.
That became synonymous in a lot of Lucio Fulci's films. There is at least one. There's one eyeball sequence. He had a thing with eyeballs because I think he knows it's very very cerebral. It's a lot of people. It's going to make them wince. And I'm not sure if you've seen New York Ripper, released in '82.
I haven't, no. I think when it comes to the eyeball scenes, I'm kind of like I want to be pre-warned, so I can close my eyes.
It's a very sleazy film. I always feel like I need a shower after watching New York Ripper. It's a very sleazy. It's quite brutal as well. But I think with horror. So, is there a specific? I'll give you one last question. Is there a scene that you saw as a child or your older self that scared you? What's a scene that scared you from any movie?
It's kind of funny. because yes, I've been lots of films. I was like from the Doctor Who John Pertwee era, and I
oh
on
right,
the sofa, that kind of. But you know, over the years, when it comes to watching sort of Hammer, there's very few things that actually do scare me. I'm just trying to think of a scene which I could jump out of. I remember, you know, years ago, I was taking an old girlfriend of mine to watch Evil Dead 2.
Oh, okay.
Cinema. And everyone's jumping out their skin. She was practically grabbing hold of my arm, jumping up and down. I'm like this, going, oh, it's hilarious. It's the hands doing this.
Comedy horror, yeah.
Yes. But they were all jumping and screaming and so on. I think I've got to be honest, because there's been loads. It doesn't scare me now, but when I first watched Jaws and the classic scene with the head coming out.
Oh, yes. Classic jump scare sequence,
I absolutely jumped. There's probably others that's kind of made me feel a bit uncomfortable, and I've got to kind of half close my eyes. But no, that is the one scene that just, when I watched Jaws, that did jump. It wouldn't do it for me now, but you know, but that's, I think that's a sad thing.
That film put a lot of people off going into the water, didn't it? Jaws is again a film that caused quite an impact. Yeah, huge box office success. I'll tell you one scene, and I didn't realise what film it came from until I was like into my early 20s, and it's the climax of Don't Look Now.
Ah, yes.
Chasing the little figure in the red coat, corner in the corner. That I remember seeing that as a young child, and I had nightmares that night, and I did not know what it was, what film or TV show it came from, and it wasn't until I was probably 21 I discovered what film it was from. I think it's a great movie.
I mean, that'd be one of the scenes. There's a couple like that where I do have it creeps me out type scene.
Yeah,
and that was the one that didn't scare me as such. It was pretty creepy.
Yeah,
and I suppose I wouldn't say it made me jump, but it certainly made me wince.
Yeah,
at the end, it was kind of rather.
Just
I think a similar one was Oh yes, yes, that's enough. I don't want to wake up to that. You know, when it comes to like what things are you scared of, you know, and although I'm not actually scared of, you know, clowns. I know people don't like clowns. I've got Magic with Randy Hopkins. I've seen on TV.
Oh, great film! I've got it on Blu-ray.
It's a great film.
Love it.
Could you watch it when there's eventually dummies? You know, the dummies are there. You know, I've got Dead of Night still does that.
Yes, I'm doing a podcast on that tomorrow. Yeah, I'm actually
even a surprisingly unpleasant TV movie, very good movie, but surprisingly gruesome one for its time called Dark Knight of the Scarecrow. So Scarecrow's going to be a bit
overlooked.
Yeah, very overlooked movie.
I love Magic.
It is a great movie. I mean, I've been reading little bits about it. The fact that they've made the dummy. The dummy does look like Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah,
quite.
I think it unnerved him so much that apparently he actually threatened to leave the film. He was just so unnerved.
I heard something like that.
Yeah.
But that harks back to the puppets in the Vincent Price episode of Voice at the Bottom of the Sea, when you have the Richard Basehart puppet that was on his shoulder.
Oh, right. Yeah. I just want to quickly say there's one scene that I saw in a film recently, a Wes Craven movie that I'd never seen before.
All right, yes.
And my fear is spiders. And I'm arachnophobic, and there's a movie called Deadly Blessing from 1981, and there's actually a scene with Sharon Stone, and it's a spider dangling over her mouth. She's being forced to open her mouth, and the spider's crawling down and jumps. Oh my God. For anyone that's arachnophobic, it is just absolutely terrifying for anyone that's scared of spiders.
I'm not an arachnophobic, but I can certainly, when it comes to stuff like that, I mean, frogs is like the best example.
I remember that. 74.
So if it's something like that, you're thinking, no, those things can creep me out, although I don't mind spiders.
Yeah.
I
hate them, man.
I can tell you a story just briefly. Me and two other lads went to watch 8-Legged Freaks with David Arquette. And one of them was terrified of spiders. We weren't, and we were laughing. It was good fun movie. I do like that. We were just too busy looking at him because he was turning green. But yeah, sorry, I was interrupting you there.
No, that's all right. Yeah, but see, that film I can handle because it's big CG spiders. Arachnophobia from 1990. I don't think I've ever seen it from start to finish. I just hate seeing spiders. I saw one today in the garden, and I tell you what, it's the fastest I've moved all week. Seriously, it wasn't even that. Oh my God, I just can't be anywhere near them, man. It's kind of a crippling fear of mine.
All right, I'm a big Spider fan. I mean, I only watched Arachnophobia once at the cinema. It was a great movie. John Goodman plays a good, fun part in it. But you find yourself saying, I watched it. It was watchable but forgettable. It was fun, and I'd watch it again if it was on TV or something, but not. I wouldn't say it's top of my list of.
Well, surprise, they're remaking it. Yeah, it's all about remakes nowadays, isn't it? That's the thing. It's like remakes are a dime a dozen now, and yeah, they're doing a remake to Arachnophobia. Probably all be CG spiders now, all CG.
Well, all right. I suppose sometimes you might get your good one pops up, but I'm just to say I'm not going to be totally enthusiastic.
No, Salem's Lot's another one. Salem's Lot's getting a remake, which I still.
It was remade once with Rutger Hauer as Barlow, if I remember now.
There was one called Return to Salem's Lot.
Oh, it may be that one, maybe, because I've got the one with obviously Reggie Nolder, the great, another overlooked horror icon playing Mr. Barlow. And boy, was that actually, I've always seen that made me jump as well. But even in my older years when I was used to that kind of stuff, it was a good scene as well.
I think, do you know what? I think Barlow is probably the scariest vampire put to film.
Mm-hmm.
I think obviously modelled on Nosferatu, Count Orlok, a terrifying looking vampire. I know the scene you're on about. Is it in the police station?
Yes, I believe so. When he makes his first appearance.
Yes,
I've got that DVD, and maybe it's time to revisit it as well. Make me revisit a few movies that I have but not watched yet.
Yeah, I will make one recommendation actually. If you like psychological horror, there's a really good film that I've told a few people about. It's called The Invitation, and it was released in 2015. It's more akin to being a psychological thriller, but there's certainly horror elements to it in the final act. It's about a guy invited to a dinner party being hosted by his ex, and he gets there and he starts to suspect something that isn't quite right. There's something a little off at this dinner party. And to me, it's a perfect exercise in slow mounting tension. I highly recommend it. The Invitation, very good film.
Certainly check one out.
Don't read any spoiler review or anything, because once you know,
don't say anything. Spoilers are great up to a point. You don't want to.
No, but yeah.
No. Only with Lucio Fulci movies, I want spoilers on the eyeballs. That's it. There's no more than that.
Well, okay, so if it's a Fulci film, chances are he'll have one.
All right.
Yeah. So I think I don't know how long we'll be going. I think we'll probably have to wrap this up in a sec. But yeah, if you want to,
yes.
If you want to tell people the titles of your books again.
Indeed, I will. Happy to do that. We'll do both. We have Cursed Horror Stars and Vincent Price, The British Connection. They're both on sale at Telos Publishing, which I think you may be familiar with.
Yeah.
I think the Vinny one's $15.99. I think Cursed Horror Stars probably that same, maybe a little cheaper. So you can get them from go on the Telos webpage, and which, if I look at the back of one of the books, there we are. We'll have a look at the back of this one. There's Telos page there, if you can work it out. They're on sale at Amazon as well. Leave a review, leave a good review. Please buy the books. I want to become a millionaire. I want to be on a yacht somewhere in the south of France with with sipping champagne and having hot and cold running bikini-clad ladies at my beck and call and eating chips.
You don't want a lot from life, do you? You really don't want much.
Not a lot from life. Oh no, it's only small ambitions.
Yeah.
So please get them, and leave a nice review if you can. They're a very good book. Telos. I've got to say, Telos I've got a couple more of their books over the years as well. They really do very, very good stuff. If you like your cult, James Bond, Doctor Who, The Prisoner, that kind of stuff, they do some great stuff on cult television and cult movies. In terms of other stuff, they do dark fantasy things, and they're run by Steve Walker and David Howe, great guys. David's wife Samantha is herself a very successful writer. She's doing a lot of psychological thrillers. I just got to say, she's got a great book called Stranger in Our Bed. I've got to plug it. I haven't got it with me at the moment, but and it's been made into a film which should be coming out next year, featuring, I don't know who's in it now, Nina Adair and Samantha Bond of supporting roles.
Okay.
Yes, so I'm going to plug them. They've been very good to me, and they're very nice people, and so I'm going to be good to them.
Okay.
So
I'm glad,
with that,
I think we've I don't know, we're up to about the 4-hour mark now, aren't we? I think, or something like that.
Something like that. I've got no idea.
But no, I'm glad you mentioned Bond, actually, because a lot of people probably don't realise this about me. I'm a huge Bond fan as well.
Oh, good on you.
I'm going to quickly put you under the spotlight. Favourite Bond film off the top of your head?
All right, we're from Russia with Love.
Snap.
From Russia with Love.
Great minds. Yeah. Yes. Sean Connery's second Bond film.
Yeah, Connery was my hero. The scene on the train, like Robert Shaw, my favourite henchman. You know, I just like the moment when he's, he never says a word throughout the entire movie. You think, is he mute? Is he a sinister foreigner? That kind of stuff. Yeah. And then he kills off Bond's contact and poses at him. Takes hey, Captain Ash, hello, man, and all that kind of stuff. And it just totally kind of diffuses a lot of tension.
Guys using the Watch Garot, isn't it?
Yes, it's a great movie. And someone said to me, it wouldn't work with Roger Moore as a Bond. He would. Bond kills Grant. You won't be needing this, old man. Yeah. If it was the other way around, it was Roger Moore. Apart from the fact that Robert Shaw could snap him in two without breaking a sweat, but he would go like, "Who, you would be needing this old man? Wasn't nice Billy Wears and all that." And then straight to his tie, because it's the only thing that's right. I'm afraid I'm not a Roger Moore fan. He was great at The Saints, Simon Templar, but the more times I've watched Roger Moore Bonds, the less I enjoy them. Okay. No, I like From Russia with Love.
What I love about From Russia with Love is it was kind of more towards. It was before the gadget-laden era, where Bond was more reliant on his wits and that. And like you said, that fight sequence on the train, just just great. And Rosa Klebb, let's not forget Rosa Klebb with her poison-tipped blade.
Frightening woman as well. I've got to add one more thing before we should. I've got to talk about my nephew, who's now grown up. He was a Bond fan. He loved the gadgets. He was a big fan of Q. So he always liked the gadgets.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And once at dinner, we were all talking about our favourite. We were talking about the Aston Martin, the briefcase, and all the other stuff. And he just sat there and said, "I like Little Nelly."
You only live twice.
About 8-year-old, wow. I like Little Nelly. It was his gadget. He loved Little Nelly, so I'll give that a mention as well.
That's good. That's one of my favourites. You Only Live Twice, actually. I enjoy it. I really enjoy it. I love the Bond theme song, courtesy of Nancy Sinatra as well.
Of course, it has some good moments. The first 5 Bonds, I say, are great. For Connery, I wasn't keen on Diamonds Are Forever. I didn't mind on Her Majesty's Service. I didn't mind on Her Majesty's Secret Service. I think Lazenby, if he had done the second Bond, that would have sealed it for him. The Roger Moore ones, I'm in the minority. I thought Dalton was great, and I do like Daniel Craig.
It was a more serious kind of take on Bond. It was a more serious with Roger Moore, I'll admit I do like some of his films. I did like The Spy Who Loved Me. That's my favourite of the Roger Moore Bond. And do you know what? That is probably my favourite Bond theme song. Carly Simon's Nobody Does It Better. I absolutely love that song.
It is a great one. Yes, it is. Yes, I mean, there's a lot to enjoy. I mean, and Brosnan, I better mention Brosnan. He's not bad. No, don't ever mention Die Another Day to me, because that is the only one I'll never, ever watch again. I'll watch the others.
The weakest Bond film. To me, it is the weakest Bond film to date.
Absolutely. Even the weaker ones had something worth watching about them, but this one had nothing to me.
No.
Just like
an Aston Martin that turns invisible was like more akin to a sci-fi film. Some terrible green screening and just pretty forgettable.
Brosnan he was looking a bit past his best as well, so even he admitted that.
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna wrap things up now. Otherwise, we'll go another 2 hours talking about Bond. I'm sure we could easily.
Maybe we do it part 2. We do a Bond one instead.
But thanks a lot for coming on anyway, Mark. It's been great having you in.
Absolute pleasure, Barry.
That's all right.
We finally meet again after various couple of false starts where you've been constantly apologising. I've got my invoice ready for the number of times you have apologised, and so I'll be expecting a bill soon.
I'm sorry I've been apologising that much, but
don't apologise.
All right then. So that's it for today. Thanks a lot to everyone that listened or watched, and I'll be back again soon to haunt you and torment you. Take care.